Well, welcome everybody from the Virginia Film Festival, all you festival goers, to this conversation today. I'm Chuck Reece. I was the founding editor of a publication called The Bitter Southerner, and left that publication a few months ago. And you can find my writing in other places these days. And my guest here today is somebody that I think is one of the most talented writers and filmmakers that the South has ever produced, Ray
There's
McKinnon.
only like four filmmakers that we've produced. So I'm number five out of four. But
well,
yes, thank you.
well, Ray, did you ever hear that quote from Steve Earle where he was talking about Townes Van Zandt, the songwriter, and he said that Townes Van Zandt was the best songwriter who ever lived, and I will stand on Bob Dylan's coffee table in my cowboy boots and say that?
I think I have heard that. Although if if uh, if I were to worship a man, Bob Dylan would be one I would consider.
Well, that's true for me too. I didn't say that I necessarily agreed with Steve on that, but I will say that I will stand on anybody's coffee table in my cowboy boots and say that you're one of the most talented people whose work I've ever had the chance to look at. And they've asked us today to talk about the South on screen, which seems like a mighty big topic for two fellows who grew up in small towns in Georgia, you know, and but do you think we're capable of at least trying to take it on?
Well, I think when people say the South, I usually remind them you're talking about a half of a continent. You don't say the North. You don't say, you become more specific to place. So uh, that's a big subject. I certainly, uh, I don't even know if I can talk about where I'm from anymore because I don't live there. Uh, I will say that there are a lot of stories to tell from the South. I'm just watching the second season of Atlanta, which I'm late to catch, and even though I lived 10 years in Atlanta, I didn't know that area of Atlanta,
Right, right,
and I
right,
feel like in watching it that I'm getting a glimpse of something that feels authentic and true to that place, and I'm being expanded by it. And culturally, there are differences from Atlanta to where I grew up in Adel, Georgia,
right.
but there's also many elements of the human condition that are universal, and I suppose. What I look for in any story, regardless of the subject matter or the location, is are things that are both interesting to me in a cultural sense, but also I identify with in a humanistic sense.
Well, the thing I like about Atlanta is that, you know, it does seem absolutely true to its culture. And one thing about it that I think relates to something that you've always done in your work is it really tries to get underneath a particular part of culture and tell the stories of people who too often go unnoticed, you know? Uh, and, I had this question written down, you know, did you think, do you think that trying to tell the stories of people whose stories get overlooked too often is something that has always driven your work as a writer and a filmmaker?
Well, probably. I mean, mostly it was about greed and trying to make a ton of money and buy many houses and
I don't believe that for a second.
um, when when I hear people of color or different ethnic groups talk about they grew up and they saw very few people that were being portrayed in film and television that 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 they identified with or that rang true to them, to where they came from.
Right.
And I totally identify with that because I had the same feeling growing up. You know, the few stories that I saw about the South were uh, at best badly done. And, you know, if you really wanted to be truthful about it, some of it was offensive, but it felt like to me that as a child, it was not a place I identified with when I was watching those movies. And then I saw the movie, The Last Picture Show, which though it was written in a small town in Texas by Larry McMurtry. There
Right.
was something about that place that rang true to me. Just to me, it's like I recognized that place as someplace I came from. And but that was rare, you know, that was rare back then. And
Right.
another, it's like the Burt Reynolds. Why did so many people love Burt Reynolds? Well, he's probably the first Southern white dude that sometimes was the smartest guy in the room, you know, because usually
Right.
they were portrayed as rubes and you know and and other things. And so, yeah, it did drive me to. I wanted to tell stories that I recognized. I wanted to tell stories that I liked and that I was drawn to personally. And you know, so that was a part of I think what's driven me to write. I also felt like uh, probably shouldn't say this, but as an actor, I was reading scripts that were about to be made, and I thought, I think I can write this badly. You know, I can at least, that gave me hope. You know, it's like, if this script's getting made, I'm sure I can write that badly. But yeah, I'm still, I'm
Well,
more, I'm not necessarily drawn to Southern stories as much as I am to stories about the human condition, whether, you know, it's a comical bent or a tragicomical or a drama that gives me some insight into, you know, who we all are and what we're doing.
well, you just reminded me of an experience I had when I first met you, when I was writing that story about you and about Rectify 5 years ago, you know, because I came down to y'all's set in Griffin, Georgia, fully prepared with a bunch of questions about uh, how Rectify was a specific Southern thing. And I remember you taking great care to tell me that what you were trying to get across was a story that was a human thing. You know, it was about to anybody who hasn't watched the, what was it, 5 seasons of Rectify, right?
It was
Uh,
4, but I think it took us like 13 years to make it. No,
but
it was
if
slow.
if you haven't watched Rectify, do look it up, because the story is about a young man named Daniel Holden, who has been in jail uh, for 19 years on death row. And then, thanks to DNA evidence, he is released from prison and suddenly comes out of prison back into the life in a fictional small town in Georgia where he grew up. And the whole story is about what a shock that is to Daniel himself, to Daniel's family, and to Daniel's community. And, you know, once I talked to you that day, Ray, I got what you were trying to tell me, that this was a story about something that can and does happen in the human condition. And it
Well,
just, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that drew to me to tell that story. One was the reality that people were getting sent to death row, life without parole. I'm pretty sure people have been executed who didn't do what, you know, they were accused and convicted of doing.
Right.
And DNA actually, the lucky ones, the ones that are able to have DNA as a part of the forensics of the crime, proved conclusively that a number of people were wrongly convicted. And so that, you know, just as a social issue was interesting, and it incited me in some ways. The other thing was, you know, there are plenty of universal stories. The man who fell from the earth to the earth, you know, the guy who's not of this place, not of this world. There's the man who came back from the dead. There's the Scarlet Letter. There's all these older stories that are in our story banks that this could that Rectify could you know, tap into and tell. So the, you know, those, yeah, the stories are universal. I watched Unorthodox this year, a wonderful I think it was a 6-part television show about a young woman escaping from what she felt like was a, you know, a very Orthodox Jewish community.
Right.
And it was really about a person, a human who could not be authentic in the situation that she was in. And that's what she wanted to be. She wanted to be authentic. She wanted to have this journey that she had control over. And I think we all identify with that. It was a world totally unique to me, and as far as the Orthodox Jewish community, but the universal human need to express yourself and be yourself, and all of those things are, again, that's back to a universal part of storytelling, and why I think you know, so many different kinds of stories can resonate with all of us.
Well, you know, which brings up a question that's interesting to me is, you know, given how universal that story was, you know, how it could apply to someone anywhere on the planet, why did you choose to set it in the South?
Well, write what you know.
Right.
Another is the, you know, because of the social political timber right now in certain parts of the country, the, you know, the death penalty is still, you know, pretty strongly felt in places, and the South is one of those places. And I also just wanted to represent uh, that region in a more dimensional way than I usually see. And
Right.
that's, you know, again, that's something that I'm still drawn to want to tell. It's all of the people in that story had a sense of humor, meaning they understood the absurdities of life, and most people do, right? And I didn't see that portrayed a lot in Southern stories. You know, they were the only people not in on the joke. So then I wanted to look at religion in a way that wasn't arch, that could
Right.
be explored in a more dimensional way, and you know, serial storytelling allows that you can go deeper. And the one thing I didn't want to do in that story was, I didn't want to be on some soapbox with my own agenda,
Right.
telling people either what I thought or how I thought they should think. Uh,
Right.
I wanted to just present the story and as compassionately as I could, and let people, you know, that's their business, what they glean from it and take from it. So a
Well,
lot of reasons.
well, you know, I think one of the ways I kind of confirmed that the story in Rectify had first done your main goal for it, which was to tell a story that was just about the human condition, and second, to do it in a way that was authentic to a small town in the South, was, you know, after that day I spent on the set with you, uh, I interviewed several of the cast members of the show about, you know, what attracted them to it. And, you know,
Money. Don't let them bullshit you. Just money.
well,
They're craving.
unless they were lying to me, I think you may be wrong. Like, and let me just read you this. This is something that, that Abigail Spencer, who played the main character's sister, Amantha, said. Uh, you know, she said, and I'm quoting her here. I've been very particular about being in Southern stories because I find most of them outrageously false. If you get a good one, it's amazing. I felt tremendously responsible for that. I have a really strong bullshit detector for Southern roles. But when I read Ray McKinnon, I was like, did we grow up together? It felt so similar to my point of view. I knew Amantha's inner life. I knew how she walks. I knew how she talks. And I felt like I knew Ray, his pain, his sadness, his joy, and his comedy.
My God, she should have helped me write this show. That's beautifully said.
Yeah, well, it was. And, you know, the other actors in the show said similar things, you know, but she was the only one who told me that in her decisions about what roles to take among those that she was offered, she actually gravitated away toward roles that would have her be a Southerner, you know, because she had that bullshit detector for the stories that she had. So I say all of that to say that I think you succeeded beautifully on both of those levels. Now, to go back to what you were talking about earlier about telling stories that are authentic to the culture, I'm curious, as a writer, what was the first time you felt like you actually ever pulled that off?
Uh, Meaning being authentic to a
To,
place.
yeah, authentic to a place and to its characters, yeah, and to its people.
Um, I feel like the first time I wrote anything because I was writing from, from where who I am and where I came from. I I'm not saying that therefore the writing was really worth anybody else reading besides me, but I did feel like I was telling it. It felt true to me, and I'm not saying my judgment of that was even uh, acute enough to we have to have some sense of objectivity about our own writing. But I felt, I was feeling something when I wrote it, so it felt, you know, real. Uh, I'll just say about Abigail, thank God that she agreed to go down this journey with me, and thanks to all those actors, I still I love them. It's almost like it's some odd combination of they're your children and this animation that happened when these actors came in and took these characters and brought them to life. So I'm very grateful that they all came to it because in this kind of storytelling, uh, getting the right person to play the role is so important. I just want to recognize them again for that.
They were they were universally like that. You know, I actually remembered being surprised when I got to the set how many of them were actually from the South. You know, it was like I think every actor I wound up interviewing, and there was, you know, Clayne Crawford and JD, you know, Evermore, several of them, you know, and they.
We tried to keep the Australians away from you. There's something about, but both of those, you know, Aiden and Adelaide, both they really were able to you find the truth in their portrayals without, you know, becoming too arch, like a lot
Yeah.
of non-Southerners can when they audition. But you know, I was thinking about media and where media is right now in the world, and depending upon which side of the aisle you're drawn to, you can see the most arch characters in storytelling, which is partly what news media is doing. They're telling stories.
Right.
They're creating narratives, and the stories that I see, you know, on both sides, the blue and the red, they're almost always two-dimensional. And I think in some ways part of our job as fiction writers is to dimensionalize human beings, you know, and to give them more depth. And I think in our society, we're everybody wants to be understood, but nobody really wants to try to understand.
Right.
And again, you know, with storytelling where you're not it's not dogmatic, or it's just a story unfolding. I think there's ways to have people, without being defensive, if they're experiencing this story as an audience member, to perhaps gain an insight into another group of people that deepens their feeling about them. And if that can be accomplished, because all peoples are, you know, they're capable of love, they're capable of anger, they're capable of all different sides, but we have so much in common. And that's what you know, I think that's a part of what drives me.
Just as a human being, I feel like the way everything has gotten today, with the divisiveness that we see in our culture, is we've just stopped listening to each other. You know, we when somebody tells us they feel a certain way about something that, and we disagree with that, you know, it's like we're being programmed to respond by just saying, well, screw that person, you know, I'm writing you off, I'm done with you. And nobody thinks anymore about asking a simple question like, well, tell me a little bit more about why you feel that way.
Yes. Yeah, that would throw me off if somebody it's like, oh my God, that just disarm you, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to listen when you're being pointed at. And yeah, I hope in some ways, you know, again, back to what, you know, what films and television can do is like, give a place for all of us humans to have a little deeper understanding about some other group of people.
Yeah. I, you know, and that makes me think about the evil devices we carry around in our pocket all the time now, you know, our smartphones, you know. And I feel so ambivalent about them sometimes, you know, because, you know, we've got a whole generation of people who have grown up, you know, with this device that allows them to, you know, for one thing, shoot and edit their own films, you know, and they're learning it from the time they're a kid, you know, and that gives us a chance to have more voices being heard, you know, but at the, you know, at the same time, I'm like, how often do we use them to actually have a conversation with one another?
Well, technology, you know, in general has made the world and the world of communications more democratic. more people are able to communicate in different ways. But that also has created a kind of balkanization of our culture, that we all can go off to our respective corners and watch whatever it is that we want to watch. And oftentimes that is something that affirms our belief system rather than challenges it, or makes us think deeper. And if it's not something we like to hear, we just turn to the other channel. And I don't feel like we can underestimate how media plays into, media is driven mainly by money. And
Right.
money means keeping eyes on the screen, keeping people tuned in. And how do you do that? Well, the way that a lot of media does it is by creating one ambulance chase after another, one outrage after another. And that outrage can be whatever outrage your audience wants it to be. And I think that's become a real divisive and in some ways a brainwashing aspect of our society. I mean, there are people who that I see that it feels like they're lost. That some of these conspiracy theories that have been put out there, that for people to believe that is something's happened to where reality is no longer reality. And that again goes back to technology and how technology can be manipulated in ways that are, ultimately not good for our society. So just trying to keep everybody hopeful is all.
Well, and that makes me think, and I almost shudder to say this, but thinking about a show like Rectify, and I don't want to spend this whole conversation talking about Rectify, but that show, the story was allowed, from my point of view anyway, to unfold at a pace that felt more like the actual lives of the characters who you were looking at in the show. And it makes me wonder, how long has it been now since you wrapped Rectify, the final season of it?
Was at the end of 2015, I think.
At the end of 2015. And you think about what's happened in the culture in the last 4 years, and it makes me wonder, like, could you even get that made now?
Oh no, I mean, I don't think so. First of all, the television, the platform industry has changed so much since then. And even though there are more shows being made now, there's also a sense of we have to make something brighter and louder and more sparkly, or we're not going to get the audience's attention. So I truly don't believe that show could be made now. It was a very little moment in time that I was allowed to do that. So I feel grateful for that. I also think that that show requires a kind of you have to be in a place almost of meditation. You can't be you can't have an ADHD issue going on and watch Rectify, because you have to engage in it. You have to immerse yourself in it. And I think that's also becoming more difficult for people to do in society that has all of these technological zaps that you get, almost 24 hours a day. So
Yeah.
that's another, yeah.
We could go down a rabbit hole on that for hours, actually.
We'd be the last two here, as a part of this, because
Exactly.
I couldn't blame them. Please
leave. Yeah, no, but before they leave, I think, one thing that I want to talk a little bit about, and I think a lot of festival goers and people who are watching this might not necessarily be aware that you're watching me talk to an Oscar-winning filmmaker. Uh, you may get
Somebody else here?
he's right there in the room with you. Ray made a film, wrote, directed, and starred in a film called The Accountant, which won the Oscar for Best Live Action Short Film 20 years ago. And yeah, and you know what, Ray? I watched it again this morning. And it was probably about my 2 dozenth time. I actually bought a copy of it on Apple years ago.
Amazing.
So I could watch it anytime I wanted to, because it really is, you know, if you'll let me have a minute to just fanboy out here. I love that film so much. I love it so much. Because it speaks to me and the kind of people that I grew up around, you know, and the way that they have been portrayed, you know, and, you know, I mean, you said a minute ago that you feel like from the first time you set out to write something, that you had written something that was authentic to the people you knew, you know, because that's all you knew to write about. But, you know, that film was so amazingly true to people who grew up, you know, in small towns and on family farms in the South, and the predicament that they've been put in, you know, by big corporations, that, you know, I still think it's entirely relevant today. So I will tell everybody, go buy yourself a copy of it and watch it multiple times like I have. And I hope it'll be a gift to you as it's been a gift to me. But, you know, going back to that, I mean, do you mind, Ray, me asking you a question or two about The Accountant?
Sure, if I don't know something, I'll just make it up.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. What was your heart's desire when you first set out to make that? Besides greed, of course.
Which that hasn't really worked out very well for me. I remember when, first of all, I've been wanting to make movies for a decade, and I tried to make feature films, and people would, you know, read my scripts, and people in positions of power, and they were like, so you want to tell a story about the son of a woman who had a lobotomy in a small southern town? You know what? We think we'll pass. And so, you know, they kept saying no. So I was almost 40, and I was like, you know, if I don't make a movie soon, I'll never make a movie, you know, and I knew that, and with the help of my wife and at first, and you know, I thought, well, let's just make a short film. So I came across this story. I was inspired by driving from Atlanta to South Georgia to see my mother. I saw an empty old farmhouse, and beside the farmhouse was a double wide trailer. And in my imagination, I figured the family had moved from that big old drafty farmhouse that cost $1 billion to keep heated and you couldn't cool, into this double wide so they could live more comfortably and try to save their farm. So that was just my imagination, and it could be, you know, partly true. And that became the genesis of the story. The other thing, I mean, I grew up, I worked for a farmer who lost his farm, you know, one of those statistics. I've always been interested in food production. Strangely, I eat every day. You know, and kind of have a fascination about food and food production and all the different, you know, the ways that we do it, and my concern for you know, the industrialization of food production, and you know, some of the downsides of that, and all of that, you know, and fucked up families. if I could say that, you know,
You
which,
can.
yeah, which I think, you know, we're most of us are can identify with.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so it all just kind of came together, and I didn't, you know, I didn't know if I could make a movie. I didn't know if it would be any good. I felt like if we made a short film that if it sucked, we'd just show it to our few investors, which was my mother and an uncle and a few friends, and then we could, you know, we could bury it. That was the idea. The fact that so many people in some ways have identified with it in the ways that they have was and continues to be very um, I'm grateful for that, and I never tire of hearing a personal identification with any story that I've made. Uh, you know, that's the story. I was afraid though, if I won that award, that I'd have to become a citizen of some sort, you know, and I was like, now am I going to have to start acting like a citizen, even though I wasn't sure how a citizen acted. Uh, um, but fortunately, you know, I'm still a ne'er-do-well. That hasn't changed.
Well, I think you're pretty humble about winning the Oscar from the start. I actually found an old story from 2000 and something, from back around, I think 2007, when you went and visited the kids at Valdosta State University, your alma mater in Valdosta, Georgia.
We're such a powerful alumni group in Hollywood. I mean, the Ivy Leaguers don't really stand a chance, but yeah, it's not
But
really fair.
yeah, but you know, I think it was something along the lines of, you know, I knew pretty quick that the award couldn't even get me into a burger joint 2 weeks later unless I bought the burger.
It's true. Well, when you put in perspective, I mean, if anybody's still watching, God bless you.
Yeah,
But you know, after making Rectify, where I really did get to tell a story for 4 seasons beyond my imagination of the kind of story I could tell when I was younger. I had no idea, you know, I got to explore sub-spiritual, existential, social, legal, familial uh, storylines that were just interesting to me, and I got to do it the way I wanted to do it. And then I had people that actually, you know, said, "Hey, we get it. We got what you're doing," and so I got to basically do more than I'd ever dreamed of doing.
yeah.
And then I so then you know, after that was over, and I was walking my dog and picking up his poop every day, and kind of, you know, the whole thing about Rectify was a man going, why am I here? What is my purpose? And that was my purpose for 5 years. But for 2 weeks, it was just picking up my dog's poop. But I came back to, now, why am I here and what is my purpose? So whatever you do, or for me anyway, it doesn't keep the hole filled up. You know, it is something you did and you can be grateful for, but you still have to find purpose in the day that you're in. And sometimes I think, and I really believe this, that if I go to the grocery store and I have a conversation with the person checking me out, and it's a good conversation, and it's a, you know, it's a positive conversation, that little drop that goes in the universal pond is no less than doing an entire television show. You know, it there's not that much difference between the two, really, and I believe that, you know, and so um, that's the way it is, I guess.
Well, you know, essentially what you've got this down to, if we're talking to, you know, young aspiring filmmakers in the audience, is you've got two old dudes telling you work as hard as you can toward your vision and
We,
let
we,
it reward you, but just be good to each other.
yeah, we should have maybe told them earlier because they've all left now, but I do feel like, on whatever journey you're on, your journey, and if you're driven for whatever reasons uh, to tell stories or try to tell stories, I think you also need to figure out, you need to be open to what really interests you, and that's going to change over time as you continue to grow, and you're going to but not what you think you should be interested in, not what you think others think you should be interested in, but what interests you. And if it's urban renewal, then go read something about urban renewal. Doesn't mean you need to make a movie about it, or maybe you do, but expand yourself. And that would be my first and maybe last and only bit of advice to people.
Well, do you, I mean, how much occasion, I don't know how much occasion you have to talk to young people who want to write and make movies, you know, but do you ever find them kind of getting lost in that, like maybe getting,
Yes, I know what you're saying. It's like you're more concerned about the medium than the message, and and
right,
uh, and that's for me, I was lucky because I stumbled along uh, through my 20s, and I somehow got out of them alive. But no one was like judging me for what have you done, what story are you telling, what are you working on, and all that. And I could go and just kind of find out who I was and what interested me. I think also there's a sense that everyone should be in a hurry, but not everyone finds their voice or their passion or what they're interested in their 20s, in their 30s. I didn't make a film until I was 40. It's so go live your life and follow your bliss. And if something doesn't happen this decade, in a tangible sense of did I or didn't I make a movie, uh, it doesn't matter. It might happen the next decade, or maybe it's not your journey. Maybe you find another path. So what I'm saying is, get out of the business while you can. While you have a chance to get a pension and then retire and then die. No, that's probably not good either. So yeah.
well, no, I follow you. I follow you. And I have some of those same thoughts myself, you know. I mean, it's it's just a fact when you go out and you spend some time and you do something that gets a little bit of notice for what you care about, you know, and then sometimes you find yourself on a different path after that, but life continues.
Yes. And I think I now we're really getting esoteric and spiritual-esque or existential-esque. It's like trying, what I try to do is to be open to where the door is, where the next door is, where the next path is. And that's not easy to do, because there's lots of things that seem like it might be the door that isn't the door. But I'm always hoping that I'm open to really where I'm supposed to be going, because if I'm open to that and I do that, I'm going to be, if not happy, uh, certainly distracted. No, but I'm going to be, I'm going to be on the path.
Well, I'm sure that as a journalist and a host of something like this, I'm probably supposed to ask you, do you have any new projects that you're working on?
Well, I just want to say that if you guys haven't read The Bitter Southerner, um, you need to, and you're interested in stories, fiction and not. And this, of course, is more geared toward the Southern culture, as diverse as that is, multicultural Southern culture. Give it a go, because this man created something very special. Um, uh, yeah, I got some things going on. I thought I would, be kind of unambitious and maybe tackle a story that takes on the culture war in a different way. So, so
That
that,
excites me. That excites me. You
you know what,
know,
it excites me too. And I think I I put it in the back burner, and then the the pandemic hit, and all that's happened since, with the cultural issues, Black Lives Matter, just everything that's happened. It's like this seemed like, no, I'm going to put this back on, the the front burner, and hope that it cooks, and I'll be able to tell that story. But we'll see.
well, I think that anybody who works as a storyteller in any format and who lives in or grew up in this region we call the South, you know, uh, we all have some kind of responsibility to look at telling stories that make people face, some facts, some stories that, we've been talking here a lot today about, the stories of certain kinds of people, and pieces of culture that get sort of swept under the rug and are unseen, but uh, the South, the United Daughters of the Confederacy swept more shit under the rug than any organization in history. You know, they are the ones who are responsible for the fact that you and I, Ray, got taught a curriculum in school that told us the exact opposite of the truth about why the Civil War was thought fought. You know, they are the people who, uh, left us with the statues that now we're now having to look at what the hell we do with. You
Have you
know,
read my pilot?
what?
Have you read my pilot?
No, I haven't read your pilot. Really? Wow. So it's, you
Well,
know, talk more about that.
I don't really want to talk about the pilot as far as the details of it. I will say that I'm exploring uh, territory that is touchy for people, but I'm trying to explore it in a way that is compassionate towards all, you know, everyone, uh, and if not compassionate, certainly dimensionalized. Yeah, it's 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 uh, it's time that we really start thinking more deeply about um, a lot of subjects. Uh, that being one of them. Um, I would say climate change is kind of important, but that's not necessarily what my show's about. But yes.
Well, I think if we could leave y'all with anything today, it's that we all got a responsibility to do what, if you're telling stories, we've all got a responsibility to do whatever little you can, to use your talent to try to, you know, open some people's eyes to some
And I would
things.
say too, in addition to that kind of story, there's also the story that does give us a break from the reality of, which is also valid.
Yeah.
That's also a valid thing. But it never hurts to, as if you're a writer, if you're a storyteller, to think about the people you're writing about as if they're real people, and to think about them more deeply, uh, because how much of that manifests in your writing in an explicit way doesn't matter. If you've thought about them that way deeply, it's going to come through in your writing.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank the people from the Virginia Film Festival for giving us the opportunity to do this. And I especially want to thank my friend, and I think I can call you that now, my friend Ray McKinnon, for taking the time to do this with us. I appreciate it, Ray, more than you know.
Brother, I appreciate you agreeing. You know, the first 10 people said they wouldn't speak with me, so the fact that this on is a testament to how desperate you are. No, been a pleasure, brother. Been a pleasure.
I think it's been a pleasure for both of us, and we'll see y'all the next time we get to do
Peace and
this.
love.